Police emergency.
This story really goes back to 2021. It was just a friendship, and that friendship initially was described as platonic, and then it slowly developed into something more.
So on the coffee table in the house, there was a note, and on that note was his plan for the year. One of those plans on there was to get together with Keith's partner before Valentine's Day.
Relationships are tricky to navigate at the best of times, but not everybody turns their passion into a deadly obsession.
He was absolutely obsessed with her. I strongly believe that he'd gone out that night with the intention of drinking, which he did, building up the courage to do something, and had armed himself with a knife and was intent on killing Keith to remove him from the equation.
Love can make you blind, and sometimes turn a mind to murder.
The offence happened about 15 minutes before Valentine's Day. It was 1:45.
This was mid-February. It was dark, cold, wet. They were effectively laid in wait for him, and then they've brutally attacked him using a severe degree of force with knives. No doubt a frenzied attack, and they've just left him for dead. Keith had no chance whatsoever.
Keith Green, the victim, was a resident of Banbury, located by the River Cherwell, on the edge of the Cotswolds.
Banbury is a market town in North Oxfordshire. It's got about 50,000 people living there. It's still one of those places where lots of people know everybody else. I'm Tom Seaward. I was a court reporter at the Oxford Mail at the time. Banbury, like anywhere really in the UK, has a problem with knife crime, often drug-related knife crime. But certainly you don't get a murder every other day. It's not that sort of town. This was an unusual crime for Banbury.
My name is John Capps. I'm a detective superintendent with Thames Valley Police, Major Crime Unit. So Major Crime will investigate murders, homicides, unexplained deaths. It's always really challenging. No 2 days are ever the same, and nothing surprises me anymore in this job. But nevertheless, this was an unusual case.
Police emergency.
Police received 999 calls reporting someone has been attacked close to the town centre. Detective Superintendent John Capps and team are on call that night.
With any murder investigation in that stage, there is a lot going on, and you've got to try and get some order from the chaos and set some priorities, get the appropriate people where they need to go very, very quickly.
Detective Constable Chris Hatton is assigned as case officer.
I'd never been to Banbury for an offence like this before, and I'd been working in the major crime department at that point for about 5 years. And when we found out that the murder had come in, instantly you had to drop everything. I had to go and deploy up to Banbury. Before I set off, I'd already found out that I was going to be case officer for it, so I already knew roughly what to expect before I arrived. And then it turned up, met everyone else who was up there and prepared for briefing.
With a potential murder on their doorstep, Thames Valley Major Crime Unit launch Operation Inuit. At the scene, victim Keith Green is found dead.
So we had Keith Green, who'd been stabbed to death in his back garden outside a shed or an outbuilding.
Keith Green was a family man. He was 40 years old. By trade, he was a carpenter. He also loved tinkering around in his garage. He had 2 children with the partner who he lived with at that house. The community was shocked, and quite quickly people were paying tribute.
We were initially told that his partner had gone down there and called the ambulance, and that he was deceased at the scene. Because of the time of night and the location being at a private residence, there obviously wasn't many eyewitnesses. The whole area was cordoned off, and we had forensic teams in.
With the crime scene and house under forensic lockdown, officers take a witness account from the victim's distraught partner. It's a delicate process.
You don't overthink, you could.
You can't be watching people 24 hours a day, can you?
There was quite a lot happening at the scene. There was a lot of people living within it. It was quite a tightly packed family home.
We also had the dynamic of the other people in the address. There were 8 children in total who'd had to be moved out into a hotel and who'd been present at the address when this had taken place. Are any of those children witnesses? And straight away, you know there's going to be significant partnership involvement from social care, and that just adds another dynamic to what you've got to consider.
Thames Valley officers Stephanie Chase and Alice Walker are the next to join the investigative team in the sensitive role of FLO.
The FLO is a family liaison officer, and the role is to provide a link between the investigation team and the family. We are placed within the family to build that relationship with them, build trust with them, but our main role remains that of an investigator. And families often have lots of information that's imperative to an investigation, whether that be a victim's routine or information about their associates. So it's to gather that kind of information and process that, as well as giving them the information about the investigation and what's happening, and then supporting them through that. So I'd come to work as normal on that morning, and I knew very quickly that there'd been a murder on the area that we cover in the early hours, and I was asked to pick up the role of family liaison officer. Alice was the second FLO on this case.
This was actually my first deployment as a FLO, so I was a bit apprehensive. But I was told that Steph Chase was going to be the other FLO on it, so there was already somebody in place who'd had that initial contact with the family.
We didn't know a lot at that point. It'd only been a few hours since the incident.
It's busy, you know, there's a lot going on. So in those first moments, we're sort of just briefed, and it's working out who the family are, the family dynamic, and what can we share with them in those initial stages.
Back at the crime scene, the investigation picks up pace.
So officers who attended the scene were wearing body-worn cameras, and one of the things that was caught on body-worn is a witness coming up to one of the officers and providing a name. He'd seen him entering.
The person that were watching, he was out here, come back from shop, his van's gone or something like that.
He provided the name. This was corrected by Keith's partner, and she told the officers that the correct name was...
I'm not saying it was him, but he was here.
He just dropped me off.
Yeah, but he was outside when I went out.
He was at the pub and he just dropped us off. I didn't even know that he came in.
What's his name?
What he told the officers at the time was that he'd seen the suspect's van parked out the front of the property. So he hadn't actually seen the suspect himself, but he'd seen the suspect's vehicle.
So initially I went out to see the victim's partner and the family. She and the children had been relocated to a nearby hotel. She was obviously very upset. She was trying to deal with looking after the children and trying to work out what was going on. It was sort of fast-moving and emotional situation.
The partner provides a crucial early breakthrough.
If you just tell everyone what you know, or these guys when they get...
He was to come to the pub and I was in the pub.
What pub was that, lovely?
The one...
Pepper Pot or the Bell?
Yeah, the Pepper Pot.
Okay.
She had been at the Pepper Pot pub the previous evening to play bingo, and two people she knew were there.
His name came and his brother came.
Right,
and
okay.
we was just I was playing bingo and I just come back in the door, but gave me a lift home.
She was quite drunk that evening, and when she came to leave the pub, gave her a lift home.
I probably had a bit too much to drink.
Right.
So I haven't been drinking for a little while because I had given up drink because I had a bit of a breakdown and I was drinking lots.
And when she got home, a short time later, she became aware of something in the garden, someone telling her to phone an ambulance, and then came to find Keith on the floor in the garden and performed CPR.
He was on the floor and he was all white and he was cold and I was trying to.
You were. Honestly, that you've done everything
We
you can.
saw you. We know what you're doing.
Trying.
You did fine. You couldn't have done any more.
Now police have names. They need to act fast.
For a murder investigation, it really is a race against time. That first hour after it's been reported to is often referred to as the golden hour. It's really important.
The sooner you get suspects into custody, the better, because you kind of maximise the evidence you're going to get from them. You reduce any likelihood they're going to dispose of property or they may be on the run. And his brother were nominated as suspects for murder. We had reason to believe both of them were in possession of knives and had used those knives, so that immediately makes them dangerous and poses a risk to others.
Within an hour, John and the Special Ops arrest team are on the move.
So an arming authority was given to our armed response crews. The address is surrounded, contained.
Come to the front door, nothing in your hand! Do it now!
And effectively they were called out of the address and arrested at gunpoint.
Look at me! Look at me! Arm, please! Walk towards me! Keep walking, face me! Look at me!
A Thames Valley Police Armed Response Unit has been tasked to apprehend 2 dangerous murder suspects.
Right, listen to me. At the moment, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything about harm and defence. You don't mention offence. I'll let the lad record it. Who else is in the address, mate? What's his name? There's a further occupant in the address. We are calling him out as well, but we're going to do it much more low level.
Officers got to them so quickly that one of them was barely out of the shower.
Just keep your hands where you can see him and walk towards me. Come round the side here, place your hands on your head and drop to your knees once you're in this corner.
Can I have some unarmed units forwards to collect both of these 09s then?
Thames Valley Police have made 2 arrests for the murder of 40-year-old Keith Green.
The custody process is always really challenging. They'll set a strategy around how they're going to approach those interviews.
Has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Keith Green. Your client's brother has also been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender and murder.
The suspect, I think, was interviewed probably 7 or 8 times over the course of the time he was in custody with us.
Tell me what you know about the allegations of you being responsible for the murder of Keith Green.
No comment.
Tell me if you want to deny being involved in the event.
No comment.
This is your opportunity now to say, I have nothing to do with it.
No comment. And that was a no comment interview throughout. And this may be oversimplistic, but if you haven't done it, then I think you'd be shouting from the rooftops that you haven't done it. And his brother gave this account where he said he'd got back into the van after being at the pub and pretty much fallen asleep straight away.
We stayed up until last orders. I finished my second game of darts and then got into my brother's van and then leaned on the window and then fell asleep.
He doesn't remember going to Keith's house. He states he was asleep, and when he woke up, he arrived at his brother's house.
Which is utter nonsense, but we've got to disprove that.
Were you still awake when your brother got in the van?
No.
Okay.
I don't recall him getting in the van or starting the van or starting to drive.
Okay.
But I hadn't slept for about 2 days before that, so my body was kind of just starting to give up on me.
When you have people in custody for murder, there's a lot of pressure to make sure that they don't walk back out of the door, because if they do, then that creates all sorts of further issues.
With the 2 potential perps in custody for up to 24 hours, police are going through their homes and belongings.
Happy for us to go in, yeah?
Yeah, let's get this sorted, then we'll sort that in a second.
We'll have the licensed search officers in very early, and they'll do their big search. They get the information that they've got at the time, and they know roughly what they're looking for. So, for example, they'll have been looking for knives. But as the investigation develops, they get fed more information, just as we learn more, they learn it. And having reviewed everything, we'll go in and look for just those extra things that might not have been found.
The searches seem to strike gold.
I took a phone call from the crime scene manager to say that we've recovered a knife.
Just outside the property next to his van, next to the passenger door, was a knife in a grate in a storm drain. So that was quite visible. And then when they moved into the house, they found a knife in a speaker.
So we say that the suspect had taken the speaker apart, unscrewed it, and then hidden a knife, his trainers, which had blood on them, and then effectively put the speaker back together again. There was evidence that they'd both taken a shower. Again, we would say to get rid of the blood on them and on their clothing, and some evidence that the washing machine had been on pretty recently.
There was a towel with blood on. There was lots of clothing that they'd obviously worn that evening. They were described as having blood on them. Obviously, we couldn't prove at that point it was Keith's, but finding a knife with blood on and trainers with blood on makes you think you've definitely got the right people at that point. We did think it could be a breakthrough.
While suspicious, all the items need to be checked by forensic specialists. If linked to the suspects, it could make or break the case. Keith's body also has a surprise for investigators.
When the ambulance crews were dealing with the deceased male, they moved him and they found a mobile phone underneath him, which we identified by sending it off to our digital forensic unit, and they did a download of the phone.
We were able to show that the phone next to Keith was the suspect's, which is a big step. It transpired that in whatever had taken place, the fight, the assault, the suspect had dropped his phone. So his phone was there underneath Keith's body, which was really important evidence to place him there.
And it also gave a lot of his contact with various people, so we're able to look through that contact and see if there's any planning.
While the items discovered are forensicated, the pathology report drops onto John Capp's desk.
The cause of death was a stab wound to the heart which had pierced Keith's heart. The degree of force used was severe. The fatal injury also broke a rib, but there were in total 8 stab wounds to his body.
The pathology report that comes through has information on the knife wounds. From the nature of a knife wound, the way it cuts, it's actually quite difficult for them to get 100% that a knife has caused a specific injury. But what they were able to do is they were able to test the knives and see if they would actually fit within those stab wounds. And they were able to say on our reports that one of the knives would have been able to make all of the stab wounds, but the other knife would have only been able to make a few of the stab wounds.
A picture of what seems to have happened the night before Valentine's begins to emerge. It's no love match.
What we understood to have happened was that the suspects had gained entry to the property, gone down to the bottom of the garden and effectively laid in wait for Keith, knowing full well that he would walk down to the bottom of the garden. And this was mid-February, it was dark, cold, wet. Keith would have no idea whatsoever that they were down there, and then they've brutally attacked him with knives and left him for dead.
After 3 days in custody, police feel they have enough initial evidence to charge the 2 suspects.
They were in custody in the very early hours of Monday the 14th, and we charged them both on Thursday the 17th.
It's then officers can get to work, and with the phones finally unlocked, begin to wade through reams of data in the hopes of finding enough evidence to connect the crime to the 2 men. It takes weeks to unravel.
Phones are increasingly important in murder investigations. They continually provide more and more information as time goes on. I'm Portia Whiffen and I'm an intelligence analyst in major crime at Thames Valley Police. Phones are essentially like a computer now. They hold everyone's information, so therefore they hold a wealth of information, sometimes directly relating to an offence, be that the planning or in the aftermath of an offence, but also it gives a good picture as to the lifestyle of the individuals whose phone that is. So an intelligence analyst will look at things like cell site data information from a handset of a phone and pull that all together alongside things like the CCTV to try and understand a timeline of what's happened. Because we had 2 suspects in custody already, my priority was looking at where they were at the time of the murder. So initially we started with identifying phone numbers for those individuals and looking at some cell site analysis.
One set of messages were a revelation. They involved the dead man's partner.
Weren't expecting that, and it was quite clear that they were in some sort of relationship. And those messages went back quite a significant period of time, until at least the summer before the murder had taken place, which was quite surprising. And that was just what I could see kind of immediately without delving too deep into the phone download. So it was quite clear there was a relationship going on. And we had to consider whether she actually needed to be treated as a suspect in this investigation rather than a witness.
I was always concerned with her. She was treated as a witness initially, and that was the right thing to do because we had no evidence to say she was involved. But the dynamic had always been there between this love triangle, and that was something that she eventually told us, was that she was having a relationship with the suspect, and that Keith was aware of that, and there was tension between them.
I was seeing.
Yeah.
So, and then I got back with Keith.
Okay.
So he was in the pub. I've been in the pub, and he was in the pub with me.
Okay.
But he dropped us off. But.
And have you seen what's happened?
No, I was in the house.
It's weeks of painstaking work, piecing it all together.
What we then found from other people's phones was the evidence that the suspect had been making plans to effectively get rid of Keith.
They just wanted rid, and that he hadn't taken any hints about leaving.
Also, a priority when we were looking at that phone was to look at any messaging between the suspects. We were able to identify some messages with his brother where they appeared to be planning a fight with Keith Green. On the afternoon of the offence, prior to the offence taking place, there was some messaging where the suspect had said if Keith wouldn't leave, he could make it so that he wouldn't come back. And following those messages, he then messaged his brother a few minutes later saying, "I'm in the mood to fight today." And then there was a conversation between them around the fact that his brother was also up for a fight.
But was it going to be a fight or an ambush?
So what we know has happened is a build-up of tension between the suspect and Keith, culminating in this kind of crescendo of incidents or feelings. The suspect was absolutely obsessed with her. I strongly believe that he'd gone out that night with the intention of drinking, which he did, building up the courage to do something, and had armed himself with a knife and was intent on killing Keith to remove him from the equation.
You do not have to say anything that may harm your defence if you do not mention one question something which you later alarm in court. Hence, if you do so, may be given in evidence. Do you understand? I know you're not happy, but do you understand the story?
Just over a month after the murder of Keith Green, Thames Valley Major Crime Unit arrest his partner.
Should we step inside just so we're out of the way? Do you want to come on in this way?
Tell him I've been there.
Murder investigations can change in scale quite rapidly, and this one did. It was a bit unusual that Keith's partner had become a suspect. I'd never seen it happen like that.
What you got in there?
Bags, lighter, keys, like it. About £5.
I found that he never knew you had.
She started off as the reporting party, and she was being supported by family liaison officers as a witness. Suddenly she's turned around and actually she is one of the suspects of the investigation.
We'll get you in the van and then we'll go, shall we?
Well, he's asking me to take my jacket off before we get in the van because I'm really hot.
We're only going to Banbury.
Yeah, we're not going far.
The fact that she was in a relationship with Keith and in a relationship with the suspect wasn't a surprise because she'd actually told us at the scene. But the actual extent of the relationship was quite a surprise when you actually looked at the phones. It seemed clear she'd been playing Keith and the suspect off against each other.
So those messages led to her identification as playing a central role in all of this, in her manipulation of others.
Okay, we're now recording, okay? And we're going to do an interview today about the offences you've been arrested for.
You spent time building up trust with them, building up those lines of communication, and for them to be then a suspect, that whole dynamic changes because they can no longer be approached in the same way. The victim's partner was arrested about a month after the incident, and it was then that the family were told that she'd been arrested on suspicion of Keith's murder. It's hard, it's a difficult conversation to have. They weren't surprised that she was involved. They were angry and they were sort of confused by the situation, but I don't think they were surprised.
For us, we found that interesting in itself. They'd been hearing these rumours, so I think they were shocked that their worst fears had probably come true. In this case, social media is an absolute nightmare. It was actually one of our biggest challenges. As quick as we were getting the information, it was getting out there and people were reporting back to the family before we were able. I mean, in minutes, everybody seemed to know everybody, and so it was constantly this game of cat and mouse, trying to be the first to deliver that information.
After weeks of investigation, police still need to understand the bigger picture to present a coherent case to the CPS for court.
In this case, there was clearly some sort of premeditation and planning that had gone into it, and understanding the relationship between the suspect and Keith's partner and how it had developed over time was really crucial. Therefore, the timeline that I produced for this investigation actually went back quite a long way to look at the times that they had been together and previously broken up and got back together, the dynamic of their relationship and how it developed, because that was crucial to her involvement and why he might have committed the murder.
And there was other evidence found during the searches that added a chill to the proceedings.
So on the coffee table in the suspect's house, there was a note, and on that note, it was his plan for the year. And one of those plans on there was to get together with Keith's partner before Valentine's Day.
And this murder took place just before midnight on the 13th, so a few minutes before Valentine's Day.
Was really planned for Keith to be seriously assaulted or injured, cause serious harm.
Silence in the custody suite is never helpful.
So role was more difficult to identify because a lot of that was based on phone evidence and deletion of phone evidence as well. So that one took a little bit more work to put together.
The phone work makes it look increasingly likely the love triangle between Green, his partner, and her boyfriend has played a part.
There's also messages on there where you're talking to saying you wish to finish with Keith and you wish him to move out. Why did you want him to leave? Why did you want to finish with him?
This story really goes back to 2021, which is when the suspect met Keith Green's partner. And that friendship initially was described as platonic. It was just a friendship, and then it slowly developed into something more. And by summer of 2021, they were well and truly in the throes of an affair. And by September, the relationship between Keith Green and his partner was really dysfunctional. There was a moment that September where he comes back to the house and discovers the suspects in there. They have what can only really be described as a bust-up.
Is reported as the victim of an assault by Keith Green during September 2021. The incident was reported by she described that as threatening to beat her new boyfriend, you, and had punched him. You did not wish to pursue a formal complaint and the matter was filed.
Alongside investigating the past through revealing text messages, Murder Squad detectives focus on contemporaneous recordings by some of the officers at the scene.
We have the benefit of watching the body-worn video. It's always interesting to look at because it's people's unfiltered reactions. And whilst it's not for me or anybody else to judge how anybody reacts to grief or trauma, there was always concern about her reaction to what had happened. My opinion of that was she was somebody who could turn emotions on and off. At one stage, she was breaking down in tears with the paramedics.
But he was making noises like he was snoring, like he was... But he was in the movie.
And then others, she seemed to be laughing and joking. I think at one point, she was captured humming or singing the EastEnders theme tune out the window. You kind of got the impression quite quickly that she enjoyed being the centre of attention.
So who's dropped you back here then? So is it?
No.
Just I mentioned I heard the name on the radio earlier.
No, it's not. His name, I can't remember it. I can't remember.
Such evasive behaviour triggers suspicion, but is very hard to use in court. So the police continue their trawl of each location visited by the suspects for traces on CCTV.
As I'm building the sequence of events, the CCTV team will provide me with a viewing log. So we had CCTV from a number of different locations. We had CCTV from the Pepper Pot pub.
And from about 7 p.m. that night, the 13th of February, the suspects and others had been at the pub drinking. They had basically been carrying on their relationship there. They were seen cuddling, kissing at various different times. And all of this is while Keith is still back home with the kids and none the wiser about what's going on.
So I would put the images from that into my sequence and fit them around the messaging that was happening at the time. At certain points you can see Keith's partner, for example, outside on a phone. I could marry that up to see if there was any usage on the phone at the time.
And they left the pub just after 11 in the suspect's van.
The van tells detectives another story.
The suspect's van helpfully had a tracker in it, so we were able to get that tracker data.
So I was able to look at the telematics and map it so we could see exactly where the vehicle for the suspect had been at any point in that evening.
We tracked the van back to Keith's home address.
We were able to marry up the telematics from the van with that CCTV to show that that was the only van travelling down the road at the time.
There's CCTV on the street. It showed the vehicle pulling up. It was quite dark at that point, so you could only really make out the vehicle clearly. Everything else was quite difficult to make out.
And we're able to show the time that the engine was off and then back on again. It was a time of roughly 20 minutes. And then the route that the suspect takes back to his home address is also shown.
While the route the suspects take is being mapped out, the CCTV picture is frustratingly incomplete.
There should have been CCTV at the murder scene. However, it appears that they unplugged the CCTV system. You'd need to have a knowledge of the location of the site to be able to turn it off. You need to know where the box is for a start, and need to know where the power supply goes into the box.
Whoever had unplugged the CCTV had left behind a partial clue.
So in the shed, the CCTV was located quite high up. On the floor was a bucket which contained oil. And on top of the bucket was a footprint. And it appears that someone had stood on that bucket to turn off the CCTV system. And the footprint on there was linked back to the suspect. And it was linked back to a trainer that someone had hidden in a speaker with a blood-covered knife and had blood on the actual trainer itself from Keith.
By now, some of the specialist departments had reported back in full.
So in terms of forensic evidence, on the knife there was found to be blood that came from Keith. And on the handles of the knife there was also DNA which looks like it came from both suspects. Finding the knife with Keith's blood on and the DNA that's on the handle is quite incriminating.
But it wasn't just events on the evening itself the investigation was interested in.
A witness came forward and notified us that Keith's partner and the suspect had actually done a trip up to Leeds.
Almost 6 months prior to the murder, they'd attended a shop that sold knives up there.
So some of our officers were deployed up there, and in that shop they identified that a knife had been purchased.
We were also then later able to obtain the receipt for a blue ghost knife.
And that knife was actually used to kill Keith.
The evidence is slowly mounting, and there's a feeling of quiet confidence in the team. But then, from nowhere, the whole investigation feels like it's being derailed.
The court trial coincided with the barrister strikes, which was a logistical nightmare.
For any case like this, you can only hold people in custody for 6 months generally, which is called a custody time limit.
Once that custody time limit runs out, essentially, we don't have the power to keep anyone in custody.
So the trial was unable to start, and there was no prospect of it starting in September. One of the options was the judge may release all of them on bail, and it's just not a position you want to be in as an SIO, facing a real nightmare scenario of murder defendants being out and about.
And that's what happened in this case.
This is a big news story for a local paper like the Oxford Mail.
In a shock decision, the court orders the release of the defendants for the murder of Keith Green.
So it's really unusual for defendants in a murder case to be out on bail. It's almost unheard of.
This was such a violent, horrific crime. You know, he was brutally stabbed in his own home. And then we're saying to the family that those people are just out there living normal lives. I mean, I never want to have to tell a family that again, because it was very hard to deal with and devastating.
Really difficult conversations, but necessary conversations. You've got the risk they pose to others. These are people who have been charged with murder by use of a knife.
A number of the witnesses contacted us in fear initially.
You worry that witnesses will just not turn up because they lost faith, and the team did some brilliant work around finding witnesses and give them confidence to give evidence.
So we had to put stuff in place to protect them and belay their fears and their worries about it.
You can easily envisage a scenario where the whole thing just collapses, because if you don't have witnesses, then you're left with nothing.
A month late, the trial begins for the Valentine's Eve murder of Keith Green. And there's chaos in the courthouse. Every day, a struggle.
Usually you have defendants being brought to court from prison. In a prison van, you see them in the dock, and that's the limit of your contact with them.
It was just different because there was the suspects on the concourse with us, and we had to be very careful with where they sat and what we were saying, because they often sat outside the door of our rooms.
We had to manage all of that in the public arena at court with the family dynamic on top of that. All of that is testament to what a brilliant job the team did day in, day out.
Keeping the trial on track is a full-time job for the officers, and not without risk.
We then had to manage the family attending court and seeing the suspects coming to court themselves freely, walking around the courtroom building.
It was very challenging for me and Steph to navigate and make sure that the family were kept away from that and not have to face them. And they didn't feel safe knowing that the people that had murdered their loved one is right there.
I think it's fair to say there wasn't much sleep during that period.
As the trial plays out, there are more surprises in store.
So there was this strange frisson during the trial. I remember the first time I saw the two brothers and I was kind of taken aback because they couldn't have looked much more differently to how they were when I'd last seen them 6 or so months earlier at the magistrate's court. The suspect had shaved his head, and for a man who was known as Jesus, the man with the beard, he got rid of it. Jesus had shaved his beard.
Throughout the trial, it didn't appear that they were taking it seriously, really.
They were very relaxed, no remorse by any of them whatsoever. And seeing their behaviour, which the jury didn't see, but we did outside of court, laughing and joking.
We got reports from other witnesses that the suspect and Keith's partner were on the train together, and actually they were kissing on the train, which unfortunately was against their bail conditions, so they weren't very careful of other people around them.
Just going about their normal lives, it appeared, which was difficult for the family to see.
I vividly remember speaking to Keith Green's daughter just before sentencing and talking to her about her recollections of the trial. And for her, she saw a very, very different side to those defendants. She certainly felt they were laughing when the knives were being passed around, and she saw not a hint of remorse.
And then, perhaps one of the strangest moments ever during a British criminal murder trial.
During the actual trial itself, in the dock, the defendant has gone up to Keith's partner and asked her to marry him.
I've never come across a proposal in a dock in a Crown Court before. I didn't quite know how to describe that, to be honest. It's staggering. They still thought they were going to get away with it, they were going to get found not guilty, and they were making plans for their new life.
Alongside the romantic interlude, the jury listens to a lot of evidence, but there's only one significant cross-examination.
Keith Green's partner was in the witness box for 4 days, I think, which is a very long time to be cross-examined.
She certainly blamed other people for what happened. She didn't really seem to take any blame for herself. Some of the evidence that she gave showed that she was quite manipulative. She didn't do herself any favours giving the evidence as she did.
I remember her saying that she must be a magician if she was playing all of these men against each other. It was like playing tennis against a brick wall. Everything was hit back.
The judge later remarked that it appeared that she actually enjoyed the attention from leading on both men.
With Keith's partner attempting to persuade the jury of her innocence, the other evidence becomes ever more important.
During the trial, when Keith's family were in attendance, I think there were things that came as shock to them. The extent of the planning of the murder and the deceit. When you hear it step by step come out in court, it's overwhelming for families, that realisation that actually that happened.
We identified messages where the defendants implied they were ready to go and this was going to be happening. They had a plan. Pulling that all together and then showing all the phone calls around it enabled us to show that this offence was likely premeditated.
I think there was an overwhelming amount of evidence that the two brothers were guilty of murder, but I think there is always a possibility that Keith Green's partner, the woman who was playing essentially two men off against each other, couldn't be certain that it would end with the death of one of them.
The jury is then sent out to consider the evidence presented over 8 long weeks.
Most incriminating, ultimately, was probably the forensics. Getting the defendant's phone next to Keith's body, recovering both knives, and the fact they had blood on both of them is really important. It just links those two and it links the addresses together, the clothing, and laid on top of that, you've got the digital evidence, the phone downloads, and also the CCTV movements. All of us, every single one of the investigation team, wanted to convict her as well because of the central role that she played in it. And the worry is that the jury will think there's not enough evidence, or because she hasn't physically played a part in it, they won't understand the dynamic around murder and manslaughter.
The team hope they've made the case clear for the jurors.
You never know how long a jury are going to be out deliberating. I've had it where it's a couple of hours. I've had it where, in this case, it was 7 or 8 days.
So that sensation, that electricity that you get in a courtroom when verdicts are read out, there's a strange energy in the courtroom. And this murder trial was just like that. So it's the main suspect that was the first verdict to be read out, guilty on 2 counts, murder and possession of the knife that killed Keith Green.
This case just kept on giving, really.
So it was a very strange moment that I've never really experienced, certainly not in a murder trial, where the foreman of the jury got the verdict on the brother wrong. So is he guilty or not guilty of murder? Not guilty. And there was this sort of quiet hubbub in the jury box.
There was a kind of physical reaction of confusion.
And then they pronounced this guilty verdict, so guilty of murder.
I remember him crying at that point. They were all stood up, and I remember him crying in the dock because I think for a second or two he thought he was getting away with it. It is brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
And for me, there was a slight sense of surprise with the Keith Green's partner's verdict, so guilty of manslaughter.
A fourth defendant who can't be named for legal reasons, but who assisted by opening the gate, is also found guilty of manslaughter. Then the sentences are handed down.
So the main defendant was life sentence, which you always get for murder, with a minimum term of 23 years. His brother's was, again, life term, minimum of 17 years.
Keith's partner got found guilty of manslaughter and she was sentenced to 8 years.
I'm pleased that the jury decided that she was part of it, because that was one of my worries, that they wouldn't think that Keith's partner had been part of the planning.
Getting the right result in court means that the hard work's paid off, that the family have got justice for their loved one.
I think for Keith Green's partner, when she heard that verdict, guilty of manslaughter, there was that final sinking in of what had happened and just the sheer enormity of what she'd done.
The Valentine's murder case won't be forgotten in a hurry.
It does always stay with you. It's my first murder case as an SIO, and this one, for various reasons, wasn't straightforward. I can't ask anything more than when the team are faced with that kind of adversity and tested times, that they stand up to it, they face it down, and it's all worthwhile.
I think we get that verdict and it's sort of case closed and we move on, but for the families, they're still living that every day.